No, we were given a choice of what speed we wanted to run, and we chose the speed.
Were you ever pressed at any point, Lloyd?
Here's the thing nobody tells you about the most famous finish in motorsport history. Ken Miles didn't lose Le Mans because he was slow. He didn't lose it because his car broke down. He didn't lose it because Ferrari outdrove him. He lost it because two men had a casual conversation in a pit lane in France, made a gentleman's agreement based on a rule neither of them had actually read, and the greatest driver in American endurance racing paid for that conversation with the most extraordinary achievement in motorsport history. And then, 2 months later, with his life. Hi, my name is Johnny, and this is American Muscle. What Ford versus Ferrari tells you. If you've seen Ford versus Ferrari, and if you haven't, go watch it right now. I'll wait. You already know the broad shape of this story. 1966, Le Mans. Ford has spent an estimated $25 million, some accounts say closer to $100 million, building a car capable of beating Ferrari on French tarmac. Ken Miles, played by Christian Bale, in what is genuinely one of the great performances of that decade, has been leading the race for hours. His GT40 is dominant. His lap times are extraordinary. He is, by every measurable standard, winning. And then Ford team management makes a decision that will echo for 60 years. They want all three Ford GT40S to cross the finish line together. A formation finish, a PR masterstroke. Ford 1, 2, 3, side by side. The most powerful image in motorsport. Miles is told to slow down. He does. Bruce McLaren pulls alongside him. They cross the line together. And then someone checks the rulebook. The film captures that moment well. Josh Lucas's Leo Beebe, who functions as the corporate villain of the piece, delivers the news. In case of a tie, the winner is determined by starting position. McLaren started further back on the grid. He is therefore declared to have covered more distance in the same time. McLaren wins. Miles, who led for the majority of the race, who was lapping the entire field except his own teammates, who crossed the finish line simultaneously with the declared winner, is placed second. The film shows Miles accepting it with quiet devastation. Carroll Shelby alone in the garage, carrying the weight of what just happened. It's a powerful scene. It's emotionally true, and it's still missing the most important parts of the story. The man they were really dealing with. Before we get into the mechanics of what happened at Le Mans, you need to understand who Ken Miles actually was, because the film, brilliant as it is, gives you the eccentric, combustible, wrench-throwing version of Miles. And that version, while entertaining, is missing the bedrock underneath the personality. Miles was born in Sutton Coldfield, near Birmingham, England, in 1918. Left school at 15, apprenticed at a motor company. By the time the Second World War started, he was already a man who understood machines in the way that most people understand language. Instinctively, precisely, and with an almost physical sensitivity to when something was wrong. He didn't just serve in the war. He became one of the founding members of the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, the REME, on October 1st, 1942, an elite corps responsible for keeping Britain's armored vehicles in fighting condition. He was posted to the Guards Armored Division, then the 29th Armored Brigade. He landed in Normandy 9 days after D-Day and ended the war as a staff sergeant and tank commander. Think about what that actually means for a moment. This wasn't someone who drove supply trucks behind the front lines. Miles commanded tanks through the worst fighting in Western Europe. His job was to understand every component, every failure point, every stress threshold, and to make correct decisions when things went wrong at speed. At lethal speed, with other people's lives depending on his accuracy. That experience didn't just give him mechanical instinct, it gave him something rarer, the ability to stay analytically precise when everything around him was chaos. People who actually knew Miles describe a man almost nothing like the film's version. He had a reputation for courtesy on the track. He was sometimes called the Sterling Moss of the West Coast, a clean competitor, a fair one. A man with an exceptional feel for a car's limits that prevented him from making contact with other drivers even in the most aggressive situations. Miles described himself this way: "I am a mechanic. That has been the direction of my entire vocational life. Driving is a hobby, a relaxation for me, like golfing is to others. A man who called racing his hobby, like golf. That is not the character Christian Bale plays, and I say that as someone who thinks Christian Bale's performance is extraordinary. The film gave you the fire, What it couldn't quite show you was the ice underneath it. The Triple Crown nobody talks about here is the thing that Ford versus Ferrari never quite lands with the full weight it deserves. What was being stolen from Ken Miles at Le Mans in 1966 wasn't just a race win. Earlier that same year, Miles had won the 24 Hours of Daytona. He and co-driver Lloyd Ruby didn't just win, they dominated, finishing laps ahead of second place in a race where every second counts. Then, Miles won the 12 Hours of Sebring, two of the three most prestigious endurance races in the world, in the same calendar year, in the same car program. Le Mans was the third. No driver in the history of motorsport had ever won Daytona, Sebring, and Le Mans in the same year. The feat had a name, the Triple Crown of endurance racing, and it had never been achieved. Not by Juan Manuel Fangio, not by Sterling Moss, not by any of the European legends who had been racing at Le Mans since before Miles ever climbed into a cockpit. Miles, in 1966, was on the doorstep of doing something that had never been done and has never been done since. I want you to sit with that for a second. As of today, 60 years later, that record is still unclaimed. Mario Andretti never did it. Jackie Stewart never did it. Ayrton Senna never got close. Fernando Alonso, who won Le Mans in 2019 and has the Indy 500 on his resume, has never won all three in a single year. The Triple Crown of endurance racing in one season remains the most elusive achievement in motorsport history, and the only man who ever held all three simultaneously within his grasp was Ken Miles. On the afternoon of June 19th, 1966, with a few hours of racing left, he was leading Le Mans, having already won the other two legs of the Triple Crown. One of Carroll Shelby's mechanics, Charlie Agapio, put it bluntly years later: Ford didn't want Ken to win at Le Mans. They wanted the headlines to read, "Ford wins Le Mans," not "Miles becomes the first to sweep Daytona, Sebring, and Le Mans." That's the thing the film doesn't quite land. This wasn't a race win being taken from him. It was an unrepeatable moment in sporting history, a record that would have stood forever, a shelf with one trophy on it, with his name on it for the rest of time. Instead, the shelf is empty. It has been empty for 60 years. It will probably be empty for 60 more. The conversation that actually did it now. Here's where the story gets genuinely more complicated than the film suggests, and more heartbreaking. Ford versus Ferrari gives you Leo Beebe as the primary villain of the piece. Corporate man, marketing brain, the suit who overrules the racers, and Beebe's role in what happened is real. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But the film skips the most important conversation of the entire story, the one that actually determined what happened. Carroll Shelby told it himself years later, and I'm going to let him tell it because no paraphrase does it justice. In 1966, Ford didn't cost Ken Miles the race at Le Mans. I did, and I regret it to this day. Leo Beebe came up to me and said, "Who do you think should win the race?" I thought, well, hell, Ken's been leading for all these hours. He should win the race. I looked at Leo Beebe and said, "What do you think ought to happen, Leo?" He said, "I'd kind of like to see all three of them cross the finish line together." So I said, "Let's do it that way then," not knowing that the French would interpret the rules the way that they did. "Read that again," Beebe asked Shelby. Shelby deferred back to Beebe. Beebe suggested the formation finish. Shelby agreed. Neither man checked the tiebreaker rule. That's the real villain of this story, not corporate malice, not deliberate theft, not some executive in a suit deciding Ken Miles didn't deserve his moment. The real villain is a casual conversation between two men who both thought they were doing something nice, something good for the team, something that would make a great photograph. And the greatest endurance racing achievement in history evaporated in that exchange. I've thought about this a lot, and honestly, the malice would almost be easier to accept. If someone deliberately stole it from Miles, at least there's a clear target for the anger. But this was an accident. A catastrophic, irreversible accident born from good intentions and a rule nobody bothered to read. Shelby carried that conversation for 46 years. From Le Mans, 1966, to his death in 2012. Every single year of his remaining life happened in the shadow of that pit lane exchange. The rules nobody checked. So, let's talk about the rule itself, because the film only half explains it, and the half it skips is the part that matters most. When Shelby and Beebe agreed to the formation finish, everyone in the Ford pit assumed the same thing. In the event of a tie, the winner would be determined by car number. Miles was running number 146. McLaren was running number 163. Lower number wins the tie. Miles gets the victory. Simple. That understanding was completely wrong. The actual rule stated that in case of a tie, the winner would be determined by starting position on the grid. The car that started further back would be declared the winner on the grounds that it had covered more distance to reach the same finishing point. Nobody in the Ford pit had read that rule before agreeing to the formation finish. Nobody checked. McLaren had started further back. McLaren won. Shelby mechanic John Collins recalled the moment Miles received the order to hold station. After Carroll talked to Ken, Collins said, "I heard Ken say in a loud voice, 'So ends my contribution to this bloody motor race.'" And he threw his sunglasses across the pit. That's the real Ken Miles. Furious, but containing it the only way a professional could, by doing the job anyway. He slowed the car, he held position, he crossed the line alongside the man who would be declared the winner. His statement afterward, "I considered we had won, but we were placed second by a technicality. I feel the responsibility rests with the decision by Ford over my protests to make the finish a dead heat." And then he added, "Please be careful how you report what I have said. I work for these people. They have been awfully good to me." The man just denied the greatest achievement in endurance racing history was protecting the reputation of the company that denied him, whether that's loyalty, heartbreak, or the discipline of someone who commanded tanks through Normandy and knew how to keep functioning when everything collapsed. I honestly couldn't tell you, probably all three. What Ford actually wanted. Here's the uncomfortable truth underneath the racing story. And look, I want to be fair to Ford here, because this isn't a simple story of corporate villains crushing the little guy. The reality is more nuanced and, in some ways, more damning. Ford had spent somewhere between $25 and $100 million. Nobody agrees on the exact figure, and honestly, Ford's accounting department probably didn't want anyone to know the exact figure, beating Ferrari at Le Mans. This was not a racing program. This was a corporate war. Henry Ford II had been publicly humiliated by Enzo Ferrari during the failed acquisition talks in 1963, when Ferrari called Ford executives worthless sons of who made big ugly cars for a pig-headed boss. Ford's response, in the most expensive and roundabout way possible, was to drive Ferrari out of endurance racing entirely. That context matters, because it means that for Ford management, Le Mans 1966 wasn't primarily a sporting event. It was a marketing operation, and the marketing operation had a specific desired outcome. Headlines reading, "Ford wins Le Mans." Full stop, simple, powerful, easy to put on an advertisement. The headline Miles becomes first driver in history to win the Triple Crown of endurance racing in a single year told a more complicated story. It had a person's name in it. It required explanation. It made Ken Miles the hero of the story, rather than Ford Motor Company. I'm not saying Ford executives gathered in a room and decided to rob Miles of his achievement. I don't think that happened. But I do think that when Beebe suggested the formation finish, nobody in the Ford management structure had a strong incentive to say, "Wait, but what about Ken's Triple Crown?" The corporate machinery wasn't malicious. It was just indifferent to the thing that mattered most, to the man actually driving the car. And indifference, at the wrong moment, can do just as much damage as malice. 2 months later, August 17th, 1966, Riverside International Raceway, California. Ford versus Ferrari shows Miles dying in a fire. The real circumstances were different, and considerably worse. The car he was testing that day was the Ford J car, Ford's experimental successor to the GT40 Mark II. It had a distinctive breadloaf-shaped rear section, built around aerodynamic theories that were supposed to reduce drag on long straights. Cutting-edge stuff, in theory. Completely unproven at race speeds with a prototype sports car, in practice. Here is what the film doesn't tell you. The J car had already killed someone before Miles ever got in it. Walt Hansgen, 4-time SCCA road racing champion, Formula One point scorer, one of the most respected drivers in America, died testing a Ford GT40 at the Le Mans test weekend in April of that same year. His car aquaplaned in the rain. He steered toward an escape road and found a barrier that hadn't been there before. He never regained consciousness. He died 4 days later. Ford halted the J-Car program after Hansgen's death. The prototype sat in a garage for 4 months while engineers tried to figure out what went wrong, and then they put Ken Miles in it. A series of clean laps had been completed before the accident. On the final run, nothing indicated anything wrong as the car came down the backstretch at approximately 175 miles per hour. Then it went out of control, spun to the inside of the course, and went over a tall embankment. The car bounced end over end. Miles was thrown clear and was dead of head injuries before emergency crews reached him. The fire consumed most of the evidence. The exact cause was never officially determined, but the physics, understood better now, tell the story. That bread loaf rear section, the aerodynamic innovation everyone was excited about, was generating lift underneath the car at speed, like a wing, like an airplane trying to leave the ground. At over 175 miles per hour in the California desert heat, the rear of that car was fighting the road. At some point, it won. Ken Miles didn't crash that car. The car failed him. His son Peter was 15 years old. He was at Riverside that day. He watched his father die. The roll cage Ford mandated after Miles's death almost certainly saved Mario Andretti's life at Le Mans in 1967. Roll cages became standardized across sports car racing because of what happened that Tuesday afternoon. Ken Miles died making the sport safer for everyone who came after him. He made it possible from beyond the grave. And I'll be honest, that one takes a moment to sit with every single time. What was really lost here is where we land. Carroll Shelby withdrew Shelby American from Le Mans endurance racing after 1966. Not temporarily, permanently. The team that had beaten Ferrari at their own race on their own track simply walked away from it and never came back. Shelby said, "Losing Ken broke his heart." And the withdrawal makes that statement literal rather than metaphorical. For a man who defined himself by competition, by going back for more, by refusing to accept that anything was over, that withdrawal speaks in a language beyond words. The Triple Crown of endurance racing in a single year remains unclaimed. 60 years. Andretti never did it. Alonso never did it. Nobody has done it. The record Ken Miles was 9/10 of the way to setting in the summer of 1966 has stood as an absence ever since. Not a record someone holds. A record nobody holds. A gap in the history of motorsport shaped exactly like one man. Miles was posthumously inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in 2001, 35 years after his death. For 3.5 decades, the man Carroll Shelby called the backbone of Ford's entire Le Mans program was remembered only by the people who had been there. It took a Hollywood film in 2019 to make his name mean something to the wider world. And the film still softened the story, still gave him a quieter death than the one he got, still condensed a life that was richer and more complicated and more human than 2.5 hours of cinema could ever hold. Shelby said, after Miles died, "We have nobody to take his place, nobody. He was our baseline, our guiding point. He was the backbone of our program. There will never be another Ken Miles. He was right on every count." Miles left behind his wife Molly, his son Peter, a car he helped build that won 4 straight Le Mans races, and a record that no one has managed to equal in 60 years of trying. Molly Miles wrote to Road and Track magazine in November of 1966, "Nothing could ever replace what I have lost. But it has been a great life out here in California. Sometimes controversial, sometimes turbulent, but we have been happy. Sometimes controversial, sometimes turbulent, but happy." That is not the portrait of a driven, tortured racing obsessive. That is a man who had built a life he loved, with people he loved, doing work that genuinely fulfilled him. And it was taken from him, by a casual conversation nobody recorded at the time, by a rule nobody checked, by a corporation that wanted a photograph, by a car that should not have been running that day on a track where the evidence burned before anyone could find the truth. Here is the question that haunts this story more than anything else. Had Miles been allowed to take the Le Mans victory he earned? Had he spent those final 2 months as the first man in history to win the Endurance Triple Crown in a single year? Would he still have climbed into that J car? There is no way to know, but it is worth sitting with. Ken Miles didn't die a hero's death. He died a working man's death. testing a prototype on a Tuesday afternoon in the California desert, doing the job that needed doing for a company that had just denied him his place in history. That more than anything else is what Ford versus Ferrari couldn't show you. And that's why the real story of Le Mans 1966 matters more than the film. Not because Hollywood got it wrong, they got more right than most people realize, but because the truth is heavier than cinema. Because the truth doesn't resolve neatly in the final reel. Because the truth is a record that still sits unclaimed on an empty shelf 60 years later, with nobody's name on it, just the shape of one. If you want the real stories behind the films Hollywood simplified, the details left on the cutting room floor, the history that didn't make the final cut, this is American Muscle, and this is exactly what we do here. Every week, we go deeper than the film. Because the truth is always more interesting than the version that made it to the screen.